I had the chance to go check out a very, very special game that I am really, really excited to talk about, and I'm very excited to share my thoughts about it with all of you. Are you ready? Because it's time to talk about Doom: The Dark Ages. So at the event in LA, we got a chance to sit down and talk to some of the development team in a previous event to our time getting a chance to play the actual game. And the team was fantastic. They talked a little bit about the kind of philosophy of what this new game is going to be, you know, how it differs from previous iterations of the game. And as a person who's played all of those games, it was really cool to hear how they're thinking about not only the ideas of what Doomslayer is going to be and kind of flipping some of that on its head, but also kind of from a gameplay perspective, how different this game is going to play in comparison to some of the older ones. You know, in some of the previous games, it was much more about, you know, being vertical and kind of jumping in the air and doing stuff there. And this game is very grounded in the way that it plays. And it feels like, you know, so much of this game has evolved over its time. It was cool to hear the team discuss what they're trying to do different, how they're trying to build upon that, and other aspects of the game that really came through in some really fantastic ways. It was so dope to be able to see how they turned those corners and made those adjustments and made the game feel super fresh in a lot of different ways. So in our time there, we got a chance to check out a couple of different modes in the gameplay sections that we were able to check out. You know, one of the biggest things that is kind of in the game now is the Doomslayer having this crazy, ridiculous shield that gives you a ton of different options. So like you would think of a shield as just being something that is there to block damage and to, you know, to give you some space to be able to get around and maneuver around enemies. But this game is actually more of a movement tool than it is anything else. Like, yes, it does a ton of damage. You can stun and parry things and get into fights and be able to kind of move around the space in a different way. But, you know, as you see in this version of the kind of siege gameplay, which is these larger open areas, we have a ton of different enemies and some alternate or objectives besides just killing everything in sight that, you know, you're using this to reach enemies that are above you on platforms. You're using this to parry some of the attacks that you wind up seeing in the space. You're throwing it out for damage because it has this ridiculously crazy saw on it. And it just felt really fun, like getting a chance to kind of jump around those individual spaces and then getting a chance to see, you know, not only from the usual ideas around, you know, what is the Doomslayer trying to do? How fast is he trying to kind of move around those spaces? And how does it kind of engage with and make the enemies feel like, some of them feel like fodder, but also, you know, what are you doing in these multi-stage fights where you're hitting an enemy, getting it weak, throwing your shield, bouncing that across the field, and then getting some power-ups and different kinds of level ups to also kind of make those weapons feel even more lethal throughout the time that you're fighting. The siege stuff was really, really cool. I love those open areas. There are tons of places to explore and get a chance to check out not only, you know, additional power-ups and things like that, but you're using the shield also to kind of fix and work through some of these elemental puzzles and environmental puzzles, I should say. That also felt really cool. I think this version of the Doomslayer felt a lot more kind of mobile, a lot more strategic in the way that you use him and use his weapons in a lot of different ways. And it really did come through in the time that I had a chance to play it, that it felt so fun. Like, as a big Doom fan, this game rocks already. It already feels extremely good. And from the time that we had with it, it just felt like I was always learning something new that I'd be able to do with the kit that I had. That felt really cool. That felt really inventive and, you know, made it feel like this series still has a lot of legs to it and feels like it can continue to evolve in a lot of different ways in not only gameplay, but story. And you know, there are some elements to the conversation around Doomslayer that I think are going to be really interesting to see how players come to it. I'm dying to talk to the team about, you know, the way that they are, you know, implementing some of those pieces as well. And it feels like this version of Doomslayer is not only just as lethal, but the game itself is much bigger. And it feels like you going through all of these different spaces is going to be something that you're going to want to do over and over again. If you miss something and they're like, oh man, what was behind that corner that I never got to? Or where was that, enemy that was over on this other side of the map that I maybe not have gotten to? It all feels cohesive. It all feels fun. It all feels smart, and it feels chaotic and amazing in a lot of different ways. One of the other sections that I thought was really cool that we came to check out was the Atland section, which was one where you are in this giant mech. You are the Doomslayer of all Doomslayers. You are taking on everything in this particular mode and in this particular part of the game. And it felt fun. It felt like it needed a little bit of tuning. It's on its way. Again, we're playing the game early. They're still fine-tuning a bunch of things. Fine-tuning, the way the combat feels, the way the enemies work, the kind of nuts and bolts of polish that you would get at a game at this stage they were walking through. But it was a really fun change of pace. I think the change of pace of getting to be this larger-than-life version of yourself while also fighting the craziest and biggest of monsters with some new weapons that you didn't get a chance to see before or have access to was really fun. Like there's a moment that might be in this B-roll, but it might also be in the footage that I captured. There's a moment in where you're kind of punching your way through these enemies, but you get a weapon too. You get guns in this section called the Atland section, or at least the Atland is what I believe the mech that you're in is called. And that changed up a ton of the way I looked at this particular part of the game. It made that part of the game so much fun, because then you're not only just having these kind of like brawl out fights, then you're having a full on like gun battle with some of these enemies, and you're just mowing through them. They have this thing where you're basically parrying some of the enemy's moves. And when you do hit the parries, you wind up getting a little bit of a boost on your weaponry, and the weaponry goes from kind of regular gun to like it's like powered up super weapon that then you're just going and rolling through fights. Like this character right here, you can see the guns on his back, and you're looking at him and you're like, I want those guns. I want to play with those. And then you get the drop pod that falls out of the sky and falls right into your lap, and then you start to go and use that weapon too. I am really excited at how the team is not only using the tech visually, because the game looks stunning. It is ridiculously pretty. It is a gorgeous, beautiful game. But it's also one of those things where you're looking at all of this and you're like, man, if this is what I'm getting at this level, what am I going to get further down the road when I get a chance to play even more of this? And you can see right there, you see how the guns get supercharged, and you're just like mowing through a bunch of the weapons, and a bunch of the enemies that are on screen. It is super fun. I'm excited to play more of that level for sure, because it was really, really good. Last thing that we wanted to kind of go through, because we have a bunch of conversations. I'm going to be talking with some other good folks that you might know. We had a really great conversation with Danny Pena and Rihanna Manuel Pena on Gamertag Radio at the event. So you'll be able to get a little bit of flavor of our thoughts on it right when we finish playing. But also, this part, the dragon level, I didn't expect to like it as much. I'll be honest. It was one of those things where I was like, I don't really like flying levels in games. I think they usually feel kind of, put in just for the sake of it. But this was probably my favorite level. And it was because of a very cool mechanic that they wind up putting into the game, where you start off, you're flying around, you have these cannons on the back of your dragon. You wind up shooting these elements on the top of these ships. And once you dodge, you get that same mechanic, that same kind of powered up mechanic. And then you go from flying on the dragon and being in that large space and looking at the world, and the sky is just beautiful, and all these enemies are trying to kill you. And then you go from flying on top of the dragon to literally flying into the ship. You wind up landing on these ships, and these ships are not just, big sky boxes and kind of these one-off enemies that you kind of go through this process of doing that. You get a chance to land on these ships, and there are full levels on these ships. And when I say that there are full levels on these ships, it's not just, again, you going and kind of just like doing the thing where you have the one objective and you're kind of going through and just doing that one thing. You literally fly onto the ship, get off the dragon, and then you're in a level. You're like in a full level where you're fighting all these other enemies and going through some of the environmental puzzles and checking out some of the weapons and going through it. And those are like a couple of the things you get a chance to do specifically on these during this part of the game, at least. I'm wondering if there's going to be multiple versions of this part of the game where you're playing in that way. But it was so dope to be able to go in there, do the stuff on the actual dragon, shoot the turrets off of the ships, and then literally jump onto those ships and continue the fight on those ships. It felt so cool to be able to do that and feel like every time that you were in that moment, that you were feeling like such a badass going through and embarking on these battles and making it feel like you as the Doomslayer are specifically made for these fights. You're finding all of these, the weapons in this game are so much better and so much cooler than anything we've seen before. And you get a bunch of different kinds of stuff. So like the regular shotgun, the super shotgun, you get the shield with the chainsaw on it. You get a mace on there that changes the way you think of the melee combat, because this game has a lot of really fun, interesting melee combat that I didn't expect as well. And then you have variations on weapons that have multiple firing modes. So you have these plasma guns that shoot directly at enemies in one form, and then you flip the gun and it winds up being a totally different gun in the way that it kind of works in those scenarios. And they have very specific purposes. So like some of the enemies that you wind up seeing in the world have these plasma shields. You shoot the shields down, then you're able to kill them a lot easier. And there's so many different variations. And the way that they do the level up systems of the weapons is really smart and gives you a lot more variety in the way you use those weapons as well. The thing that was extremely interesting and super fun, and I talked a little bit about this not only in the meetings that we had with them discussing the overall game and kind of overall ethos of what they're trying to do, but as a player, you have lots of options in terms of the way that the combat works. So what I mean by that is there are these difficulty sliders that are in the game, and those difficulty sliders can tune a bunch of different things. So you can be like, I want the enemies to hit harder. I want to take more damage. I want the projectiles to move at a different speed. And why that's interesting and cool is because when you have those projectiles move at different speeds as opposed to what you are used to in the regular layer of it, it changes the way that you fight. Because imagine it then becomes like something like Returnal. If you ever remember Returnal, we had like almost bullet hell amounts of projectiles being shot at you at various speeds. Imagine if you had an enemy that shoots like 5 or 6 different projectiles at once, but you then have to have those. If you've changed it, you can make all those things really slow. So it changes not only how many things you have to worry about on the field, but then it changes the way you have to parry those bullets and try to shoot some of those bullets back at the enemies, because you get the timing down fairly quickly. But if you change those parameters, it then changes the way that all of those mechanics work as well. It's great for accessibility. It's great for players who are looking for a little bit more of a challenge. It just changes the way that game plays in such a fundamental way that you can tune it for different versions of how you want to play that game. It's a super smart and really brilliant way to kind of change the way you think about difficulty, but also the way you think about the way that games play and the way that the mechanics of those games are interactive, and you can kind of, get the game that you want in any version of it. So it's like, you're used to kind of just picking various default settings and changing difficulty that way. Now you can really go in and fine tune all of those small parameters, or a bunch of those small parameters, to really give yourself something very cool to play. Man, this game is so fun. I am so excited for this thing. I am so hyped for what this game is going to wind up being. I'm just a big fan of the team. And again, they continue to make some of my favorite games on the planet. And, when Dark Ages got announced, I was already ready for it. And then getting a chance to play it, man, I am hyped as hell for what this game is going to wind up being. So we're going to share a little bit more gameplay on our social channels and on our YouTube channel. We'll probably share another like 5 or 6 minutes of some just straight gameplay of the various pieces of it together. But make sure you're checking out everybody else's content as well. I'll be on various levels of content. I think I'll be doing some other stuff with some other folks outside of Danny and Rihanna as well, plus the stuff that we got to share here. But if you are hyped and excited for Doom: The Dark Ages, you will have a really good time, I think, once that bad boy drops and you're ready to kind of get your hands on the sticks for it. So massive shout out to our friends at Bethesda for getting us in and having us come down to LA and check out the game a little bit early. We are dying to get those folks, Hugo and the rest of the team on the show to actually talk about the game at some point, to be an interview that I've not had yet, cross off a check off a bucket list item in a big way. But this game is ready to go. I think this game is ready to kick your ass in all the best ways. So massive shout out to everybody there. A massive shout out to our friends over at Bethesda for the access. And we hope you again check out more of our work here on Spawn and Me on our YouTube channel, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts all around the world and all around the globe. So make sure you give us a follow, a like, subscribe to the channel. We're trying to get to our 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And we hope that you are having a wonderful week. So please, please, please get out there, get some sunshine in your life. Go wash your hands, go wash your butt. Go say something nice to somebody in the world. And we will see you all very soon. Much love and peace.